Prior to the restyling carried out in 2011, atmospheric engines 2.0, 150 horsepower, and 2.5, 172 horsepower, belong to the EJ series. These age-old timing belt-driven boxer units are well known from most Subaru models. The Junior 2.0 LEJ20 engine is the most reliable in the lineup. Servicemen estimate its average resource at 250,000 to 300,000 kilometers. After the overhaul, he is able to serve the same amount more. The average resuscitation does without treatment of the cylinder block or heads. Basically, wear of only piston rings and liners goes beyond the tolerances. The main thing is to change the oil in the engine according to the regulations, at least every 15,000 kilometers, and monitor its level more often. All Subaru engines have a good appetite for aggressive driving or long-term movement at high speeds. The older atmospheric brother EJ25 2.5L is the same 2.0 engine, but with bored cylinders. Accordingly, due to the thinner walls between the pots, it is prone to the so-called overheating, which occurs during prolonged high loads. Usually this is a long, about an hour, ride at speeds close to the maximum. Even with a working cooling system and clean radiators, head gaskets can burn out. Sometimes it leads the contact planes of the cylinder block and heads. With severe overheating, piston rings lie. Because of this, oil consumption increases, and sometimes even scuffs appear on the cylinder mirror. When buying a car with an EJ25 engine from your hands, do a test at the service station for the content of exhaust gases in the cooling system. He will tell you about the condition of the cylinder head gaskets. The operation is inexpensive and requires simple equipment. Do not spare money, about 1,500 rubles, for the so-called leak test, which will show a leak in the cylinders. It is akin to a compression test, but much more accurate. Motors with a capacity of 230 and 263 horsepower, supercharged versions of the EJ25 engine. The increase in strength is the merit of other firmware of the brains of the engine. The average resource of supercharged brothers is estimated at 100,000 to 150,000 kilometers. The faults are the same as those of atmospheric units, they only appear on earlier runs. The original breakdown of turbo engines is the cranking of the liners. A common cause is oil starvation due to low levels of lubrication or loss of its properties. Therefore, even with light use, it is important to reduce the oil change interval to 7,500 kilometers, and if the car participates in competitions, the oil must be changed at least every 5,000 kilometers. A great way to avoid dangerous conditions for the motor is to install additional sensors. Owners tend to limit themselves to oil temperature and pressure readings so they know when it's time to pull off the track and let the car cool down. Turbo engines are often tuned during repairs. They put a forged piston group, an oil pump with increased productivity, strengthen the cylinder block, etc., whoever is in what much. Often, the owners squeeze all the juice out of the engines at the same time, installing, for example, a turbine with a higher pressure. Such units do not last long, therefore, buying tuned cars should be treated with caution. The stock turbocharger is reliable. If you follow a couple of simple rules, he will outlive the engine. A shorter engine oil change interval will help prevent coking of the turbine cooling tubes. Allow the compressor to cool while the engine is running before shutting it off after hard driving. It is more efficient to do this not at idle, but on the go, dropping gas a couple of kilometers to the house. This is how oil and antifreeze circulate better through the turbine. A separate story is the timing drive on EJ motors. The belt takes care of the prescribed 105,000 kilometers even on modified engines, but it's better to play it safe and change it early, because in 99% of cases a break means the pistons meet the valves. At the same time, all rollers with tensioners are changed. For reinsurance, servicemen recommend updating the crankshaft and camshaft oil seals. They do not always live up to 200,000 kilometers, and any intervention in the timing drive is very laborious and expensive. Leakage of oil seals is fraught with a belt jump with known consequences. The cooling pump is more reliable. It is changed together with the second belt replacement. It rarely survives up to 300,000 kilometers. Its backlash is not as bad as a leak, which again can lead to a belt jump. After restyling, the valuable units of the FB series, with indices 20 and 25, replace the EJ atmospheric engines. They are built on the basis of their predecessors and have the same power characteristics. Chain problems are rare. According to servicemen, its resource is at least 200,000 kilometers. The main thing is to monitor the level and condition of the oil. The lubrication of the chain and the performance of the tensioner depend on it. The mileage on these motors is not as great as on the EJ, but there is no reason to fear for their longevity. The only and infrequent disease, oil leakage from under the chain cover with a run of 50,000 to 60,000 kilometers, is cured with the sealant. The FB25 overheating that happens with the EJ25 has not yet been recorded, although the motors are structurally similar. The resource of the drive belt on any motor depends only on the operating conditions of the machine. The lower bar is 50,000 kilometers. The less dirt and water gets on the belt during off-road assault, the longer it lives. The condition of the cooling radiator of any motor does not affect its well-being so much, but washing is carried out once or twice a year, depending on the mode of operation. The engine and air conditioning radiators are located very close to each other, and this sandwich is completely dismantled. On runs over 100,000 kilometers, the check engine lamp often lights up. Error 0420 is issued, low neutralizer efficiency. This usually happens when the unit heats up, when the car drives along the highway for a long time at a constant high speed. The reason is bad fuel. Often the mistake is simply erased, the owner changes the gas station, and the problem goes away. But sometimes the fuel has time to kill the catalytic converter. Treatment depends on the wishes of the owner. The neutralizer is either changed to a new one or cut out and made a snag for atmospheric engines for the second controlling oxygen sensor. This is a spacer in the place where the second oxygen sensor is installed, which removes it from the exhaust gas stream. For supercharged engines, the sensor is bypassed by flashing the brains. If the faulty converter is not clogged and melted inside, they do not touch it and limit themselves to snag. Transmission. At Subaru, the scheme of all-wheel drive transmission depends on the type of gearbox and engine. On the Forester, paired with the 5-speed mechanics, the center differential works with a viscous coupling blocking it. Alas, the clutch does not like long driving in extreme conditions and is prone to overheating. With such operation, it usually dies after 100,000 kilometers. The node is expensive, but the replacement procedure is simple. The third Forester has a reduction range in the transmission. It is only available on 2-liter machines with a manual transmission. None of the servicemen remember problems with such handouts. There are no fundamental differences between mechanical boxes associated with motors of different capacities. The nodes are reliable. The main thing is to change the oil regularly, every 50,000 kilometers. The average clutch life is 130,000 to 150,000 kilometers. After 150,000 to 200,000 kilometers, the gear selector stem seal begins to leak. On machines with hydromechanical machines, there is an original center differential and a device for blocking it. Paired with supercharged engines, they are more intricate. But in both cases, there are no serious complaints about their reliability. With engines up to 230 horsepower, a 4-speed automatic is combined, and with the 263 horsepower, a 5-speed. Both boxes are from the same family and are quite overgrown, but reliable. Servicemen advise changing the oil every 30,000 kilometers. At the first pit stop, a regular, partial replacement is carried out. At the second, a complete one, with the connection of a special installation. This is justified. After all, off-road and high-speed rides for Foresters are a common thing. But subject to the maintenance regulations, these machines digest the higher torque of reasonably modified motors. Due to the untimely oil change in the machine, shocks and delays first occur when shifting gears. This is due to wear products in the aged fluid that clog the solenoids. If you ignore the warning signs, then soon an error will light up on the instrument panel, and then overheating of the clutches and torque converter. In winter, due to intense acceleration, immediately after a cold start, gasket leaks occur between the differential housing and the gearbox input shaft seal. It's about the unawakened hardened seals. The oil change interval in the gearboxes is also small, 50,000 kilometers. Sometimes on a run of 100,000, the indication of oil overheating in the rear gearbox lights up. The reason is a dirty contact in the connector of its sensor, located outside. He often rots. The sensor does not need to be changed, just clean the contacts or repair the wiring. The only frankly weak point in the transmission is the propeller shaft outboard bearing. It starts to buzz strongly at speeds above 50 km/h after 30,000 to 40,000 kilometers. Dealer services often change the cardan assembly, about 70,000 rubles, and unofficial ones, a separate bearing for 700 rubles. Cardan crosses nursed for 150,000 kilometers. Strong backlash in them causes tangible vibrations. Oil seals and anthers in the transmission are durable. In the risk zone, only elements located close to the exhaust system. The fastest, after 100,000 kilometers, he destroys the internal anther of the front right drive. On modifications with all EJ motors, a hydraulic power steering is installed. Reiki rarely flow, and not earlier than 100,000 kilometers. Usually the upper oil seal is sweating at the exit of the steering shaft. The rail repair kit also includes other seals, so it is completely disassembled and updated. Hoses under the expansion tank and on the pump leak even less often. It is important to periodically monitor the oil level and change it according to the regulations, every 50,000 kilometers. When changing the oil, do not allow the power steering pump to run dry for a long time. The assembly dies quickly and costs about 20,000 rubles. Steering. Electric power steering is assigned to versions with FB motors. Knocks in the rail occur after 30,000 kilometers. Formally, this is not considered a malfunction, and under warranty, the rails are not changed for everyone, although the manufacturer tries to meet the needs of customers. The unofficials have found a cure. Knock occurs at the junction of the steering gear and rack and pinion. The rail is disassembled and the factory support bushing of this pair is changed to a non-original, homemade one. The gap decreases and the knock goes away. Suspension. Consumables in the suspension, bushings and stabilizer struts. They are enough for 30,000 to 40,000 kilometers. The weakest are the rear silent blocks of the front levers, which live at least 100,000. They can be bought separately, like many other rubber-to-metal joints. The exception is the silent blocks of the rear upper forged arm. The assembly costs 16,000 rubles. Wheel bearings also stably survived the 100,000th run. The price assembled with hubs is quite affordable, 500,600 rubles. A feature of the Forester suspension is rear self-priming shock absorbers that provide constant ground clearance regardless of the vehicle load and less roll in corners. But they quickly die on silt roads after several serious breakdowns on a loaded car. Fortunately, there is an alternative to the original parts, estimated at 25,000 rubles. The pumping system is built into the shock absorber rod and body. Therefore, for 17,000, a set of 2 conventional shock absorbers is installed, with matching springs. In everyday driving modes, the difference in the behavior of the car will not be striking. Front shock absorbers go 100,000 to 150,000 kilometers. Thrust bearings are updated at the second change of shock absorbers. Many owners who switch to Forester from other Japanese crossovers of this class complain about the lack of brake sensitivity. Later they get used to it, but some still modify the braking system. Throwing money down the drain, you can't get rid of this feature. The only weak point of lighting technology is the thin glass of the front fog lamps. Often they crack due to a sharp temperature drop, for example, when water gets on the headlights while driving through puddles or when storming high snowdrifts. Electric. The interior electrics are simple and reliable. Only the bearing of the heater fan shaft causes complaints. If you immediately turn on the stove at maximum speed on a cold car in winter, the bearing will buzz to 150,000 kilometers, and it can only be replaced with the fan assembly. On a run of more than 100,000 kilometers, the headlight corrector sensor sometimes fails, located on the rear suspension arm, by which the system determines the position of the body. The hinges in its movable joints turn sour. At the same time, a system error lights up and the corrector lowers the headlights to the lower position.